You've been sitting here very patiently. Mapaseka Muroa she's got what she calls political quickie podcast that she runs. Good, and thank you very much for waiting for here. Voter turnout. You voted earlier today.
Correct.
Okay, and your experience was good. You told me off air and earlier when we started our discussion as well. But you also noted something about the voter turnout,
yes,
which in your books was unexpected this morning at your voting station somewhere in Johannesburg. Can you just remind us what happened?
Okay, so got there around 7:30 and there were quite a lot of people, which was surprising because COVID-19 is a factor. But another issue is the protests that we've seen, particularly in KZN in the Eastern Cape and now at Luthuli House. It's that people are actually despondent.
And earlier today in Soweto, parts of Soweto as
exactly.
well?
So even the people in Ekurhuleni saying they're not going to vote because they haven't had electricity for 4 months.
But you saw a lot of people in the queue this morning.
Yes, a lot of people in the queue. But I think I'd also like to speak to the fact that people are very despondent, Braden. If you look at the past 12 years in South Africa, 2008 and the quote-unquote xenophobic attacks, that wasn't just a hatred, a form of hatred. There was also an economic underlying issue of unemployment, of poverty. 2012, Marikana, underlying issue also of inequality there. Then we saw fees must fall as well, 2016. And also that spoke to an inaccess to education, right? We also saw the looting, quote-unquote looting that happened this year. That's another issue. So you've got these pockets of violence that are going on in the country, and it speaks to how there is a level of people not trusting the electoral system that's currently at play and wanting to take matters into their own hands.
But you are not one of those people, because you voted today, and I'm bringing this up because you are young.
Yes.
You are in your 20s, and you went and you put your cross on the ballot paper. As a young South African, why?
I think it's crucial, Braden. It's my constitutional right. I want to absolutely practice it. However, I do understand people feeling despondent. What I don't understand is why we can't come and actually vote, because that's the only way we can correct what's happening. I mean, some people can argue that, well, taking to the streets can actually be effective. Yes, it can be effective, but what you don't want is an Arab Spring. Taken to the streets, but not having any consistent action and leadership after that. So if you are going to take to the streets, just ensure that there is a plan in place of what's to happen afterwards. So very crucial to go and to vote and to express my constitutional right and to ensure that I get to vote for a person that I believe in.
Now, the youth vote cannot be monolithic.
It's not.
Young people are just so diverse. But can the black vote be monolithic?
It isn't, Braden. I mean, if we look at from 1994, of course, majority of black registered vote South Africans have voted with the African National Congress. But there's been a shift since then, particularly in 2016. If you look at Nelson Mandela Bay and Tshwane, right, in particular, the African National Congress regressed in some of the metros, but in those two metros in particular, the Democratic Alliance became the biggest political party. So what we're seeing is a shift. Voters are evolving, not just in their ideology, but in their voting pattern. Let's look at an illustration. What happened with Gareth Cliff and Muzuli, the spokesperson of One South Africa movement. Out of that, there were, different ideologies or perspectives as to that. There was the South Africans who believe in non-racialism, and they're saying, look, black people can be racist, white people can be racist, and black and white people can fight racism. And they're saying, look, in a conversation like this, we want to be heard. We want our side to be respected. Then there's another group of South Africans who are saying, look, actually, the definition of racism is incorrect, because racism is structural. It's not just hatred or prejudice, but it's laws, it's policies, it's institutions that are in place and subjugate a particular group of people. And so they mobilize on the basis of their experience, their lived experience. Then you've got another group that says, look, but race is not a factor, actually, particularly in the local elections, which is interesting because apartheid special planning plays a part in that.
So that diversity will play itself out on the ballot paper. Before I let you go in very briefly, we've seen the IEC in its first statement, among other challenges, reporting earlier that there's been a presiding officer who's been arrested in eThekwini Metro for allegedly stuffing a ballot box and stuff. As a young person, would you be concerned about the possibility of rigging of voting? Or what do you think about these allegations that might be happening?
Yeah.
Very briefly, Mapaseka.
Not to a large extent, but I'm also not surprised. You'll remember that in 2019, there were votes that were discarded. There were people who double voted. So not surprised, but I'm not expecting a lot of, this voter electoral fraud to happen.
Yeah, so shouldn't be having those numbers. We'll have to watch and see what happens over the next few days, but hopefully it happens the way you are expecting, so we don't have anything marring the integrity of the result. Thank you very much. That's political analyst Mapaseka. She's, of course, with the Political Quickie podcast.